Have you ever been told you don't belong simply because of who you are? Imagine walking into a first-class lounge, your business class ticket in hand, only to be met with suspicion, whispered comments, and security pulling you aside as if you were the intruder. What would you do if the world doubted your presence not because of your qualifications, your experience, or your success, but because of the color of your skin? Naomi Fields, a black CEO, faced that exact moment, alone in an airport filled with onlookers, where every decision carried risk. She could comply, stay silent, and let the humiliation pass. Or she could stand her ground, knowing that the choice she made would ripple far beyond that terminal. What would you have done in her place? Could one person's courage really challenge a system built on decades of bias? Could dignity outweigh fear? Naomi's story is more than a confrontation. It's a journey of strategy, resilience, and turning injustice into accountability. Join us as we follow Naomi's incredible path, from that tense airport moment to reshaping an entire industry. Think about your own moments of challenge, and ask yourself, how far would you go to stand for what is right? If this story resonates with you, hit like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Let's begin this journey together. The boarding gate at Chicago O'Hare was its usual chaos that Friday afternoon. Rolling suitcases bumped against legs, overhead announcements echoed in the cavernous terminal, and the scent of burnt coffee drifted from the kiosk near Gate C-17. People jostled for position, glancing at their boarding passes, eager to be first on a flight bound for New York City. It was supposed to be an ordinary flight, but it would become anything but ordinary. Dr. Maya Ellison stood quietly in line, dressed simply in dark jeans, a cream blazer, and worn-in leather flats. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her face calm, her hands steady as she held her boarding pass. There was nothing flashy about her appearance, no entourage, no designer luggage stacked behind her. To most people in line, she looked like any other passenger heading to New York for the weekend. But Maya was not just another passenger. She was the 42-year-old CEO of Ellison Global Partners, a multi-billion-dollar investment firm with clients across 3 continents. She had spent the last decade navigating boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her, yet walked away respecting her. Her firm was on the verge of finalizing a $5 billion investment in Apex Airways, the very airline she was boarding today. It was the kind of deal that could shape an industry, and it was a deal Apex desperately needed. The boarding line crept forward. Maya tapped her phone once more to review her notes. She had an early meeting in Manhattan the next morning with the Apex board, a discussion that would finalize whether Ellison Global Partners would commit the funding. She was ready, calm, composed, until the moment came that would flip everything upside down. At the gate, the scanner beeped as the agent checked her ticket. First class, seat 2A. Maya said softly. The agent frowned. She looked Maya up and down, her eyes pausing on the scuffs of her leather flats, the simplicity of her carry-on bag. For a moment the agent hesitated, then forced a thin smile. "Proceed," she said, but the suspicion in her eyes lingered. Maya walked down the jet bridge, the recycled air growing warmer as she stepped into the cabin. First class was half full, already businessmen in tailored suits, a couple dressed for a Broadway weekend, a college student with noise-canceling headphones. She slipped into seat 2A, placed her bag neatly in the overhead bin, and pulled out a notebook. She always wrote a line before takeoff, something her father had taught her, a ritual to ground herself. She had just written 3 words: "Stay steady, Maya," when a voice interrupted. It was sharp, authoritative. "Excuse me, ma'am, may I see your boarding pass again?" She looked up. A flight attendant with a rigid smile and an immaculate bun stood over her. Her badge read Victoria Sloan. Maya handed over the pass. Calm. Victoria examined it, then leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that wasn't quiet enough. "We've had some issues with counterfeit first-class tickets recently. I just need to confirm." Several nearby passengers glanced up, curious. Maya felt the familiar sting, that subtle doubt cast like a shadow over her presence. She had lived this moment countless times, questioned in hotel lobbies, followed in luxury stores, asked to show ID when others were waved through. She met Victoria's gaze evenly. "My ticket is valid. Seat 2A. If there's an issue, perhaps check your system." Victoria pressed her lips together, clearly unsatisfied. "Just a moment," she said curtly, stepping away. Maya exhaled, steady but not surprised. She knew what was coming next. Minutes later, 2 uniformed security officers boarded the plane. Their heavy steps thudded against the carpet as they moved down the aisle. Passengers' eyes followed them. The taller one, Officer Hank Mercer, stopped at her row. His jaw was set, his tone blunt. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." The cabin fell into a hush. Maya felt dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some judgmental, some already convinced she had done something wrong. She closed her notebook slowly, placed it into her bag, and stood. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, her voice calm, deliberate. "Your ticket doesn't check out," Mercer replied flatly. "You'll need to step off the aircraft." A murmur ran through the cabin. Someone whispered, "Scammer." Another passenger shook his head. The humiliation was sharp, immediate, familiar. Maya kept her chin high. "My ticket is legitimate," she said, "but if you insist, I'll cooperate." Mercer gestured toward the aisle. The second officer reached for her arm. Maya pulled back gently. "That won't be necessary," she said, her voice firm but quiet. She walked on her own, steady steps down the aisle, past passengers who turned away or stared too long. A few lifted phones, recording. One, a young woman near the back, whispered to her companion, "That's Olivia Chen. She's live streaming this." The phone camera followed Maya's slow walk, capturing every detail the set of her shoulders, the calm in her eyes, the injustice written across her silence. As she reached the jet bridge, Maya heard the captain's voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll experience a slight delay." His tone was clipped, uneasy. The door closed behind her. She was led into the sterile gray of the security office, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Officer Mercer gestured toward a chair. "Sit down. We'll sort this out." Maya sat. She folded her hands in her lap, unclasped them, then folded them again. The humiliation burned, but underneath the burn there was steel. She knew who she was, she knew what she carried, and she knew this was no longer just about her. The clock ticked on the wall, outside in the terminal. Passengers were already posting clips online. The hashtags had begun. Flying, while black, seat 2A, and somewhere in New York. Apex Airways executives were waiting for a meeting that might never happen. Maya Ellison, CEO, investor, daughter, and fighter. sat beneath fluorescent lights with security doubting her right to sit in seat 2A. She inhaled, slow and steady. The storm had begun. Chicago's skyline still lingered in her mind as Maya sat alone in that windowless room, the hum of the fluorescent lights pressing against her thoughts. Hours earlier, she'd been sipping coffee in her kitchen in Atlanta, her mother humming gospel tunes in the background, sunlight spilling across the counter. That morning felt a lifetime away. Maya Ellison was no stranger to scrutiny. She had grown up in a small neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta, where her mother Loretta raised her and her brother with 2 jobs and relentless faith. Maya had learned early that the world would test her twice, once for being a woman, again for being black. She also learned that composure was its own kind of armor. Her calmness wasn't born of indifference, it was born of survival. At 42, Maya had built Ellison Global Partners into one of the most respected investment firms in the country. Clients sought her judgment because she saw both numbers and people. She didn't just calculate returns, she measured impact. When she walked into a boardroom, she carried herself like the daughter of Loretta Ellison, not just the CEO on the masthead. That meant dignity came first, always. Yet on that flight, none of it mattered. To Victoria Sloan, she was just another passenger who didn't belong. To Officer Hank Mercer, she was just another body to be escorted. Maya felt the weight of that reality pressing down on her chest, heavier than any corporate negotiation she'd ever faced. She closed her eyes in the sterile room, recalling the voice of her mother from years ago, baby. When they try to strip you down, you stand taller. Don't let them tell you who you are. The irony was sharp. That very evening, she was scheduled to dine with Apex Airways executives in Manhattan, a dinner meant to finalize whether Ellison Global Partners would commit $5 billion to revitalize the airline. The irony cut even deeper, knowing Apex had positioned itself publicly as a champion of diversity, plastering glossy brochures with smiling faces, and yet here she sat, its potential savior treated as a trespasser. Outside, chaos brewed. Olivia Chen's live stream was climbing past 200,000 views within minutes. The clip of Maya's steady walk down the aisle, chin lifted, had already been reposted on Twitter with captions ranging from outrage to solidarity. Passengers inside the plane were whispering, filming, posting. The seed had been planted a story too outrageous to stay quiet. But inside the security room, Maya faced silence. Officer Mercer flipped through her boarding pass, tapping at his tablet as if the truth might appear differently if he pressed hard enough. "Doesn't match up," he muttered. "It matches," Maya replied softly. "Your system may not." He looked up, eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, let's not make this harder than it has to be." Maya tilted her head, studying him. His voice carried authority, but his eyes carried habit. He wasn't investigating, he was assuming. She had met dozens like him before, men who confused suspicion with competence. "I'm not making it hard," she said. "I'm simply telling you. I have a valid ticket. Seat 2A. I boarded correctly. What you're doing now has nothing to do with the ticket." Mercer shifted uncomfortably. The second officer lingered by the door, arms folded. Maya could feel her pulse steadying, not racing. Her armor was intact. Meanwhile, across the terminal, Olivia Chen was refreshing her feed, watching numbers climb. She recognized Maya instantly. 2 years earlier, she had covered a Forbes feature on Ellison Global Partners. Maya's face was unforgettable. Olivia whispered to herself. They have no idea who they just pulled off that plane. She tapped record on another video. This woman is Dr. Maya Ellison, CEO of Ellison Global Partners, one of the most powerful black women in finance. Apex Airways just dragged her off a plane accusing her of faking her first-class ticket. Stay tuned. The video spread like wildfire. Within half an hour, major journalists were retweeting, tagging Apex Airways, demanding a response. Maya didn't know this yet. She sat beneath the sterile lights, her mind flickering between fury and clarity. Her thoughts drifted back to her firm. She pictured her team in Atlanta, analysts poring over spreadsheets, junior partners preparing presentations. She had told them all, numbers are easy. People are hard. That's why we must never lose sight of dignity. Those words echoed now, sharper, as if challenging her to act. Mercer's radio crackled. We're holding her. Passenger Ellison. Maya corrected him gently. That's Dr. Ellison. It wasn't vanity. It was precision. Years of work. Nights of study. Sacrifices by her mother. None of it would be erased in this room. The officer smirked faintly, muttering, Doctor or not, you're staying here until we clear this. Maya leaned back in the chair. The walls seemed to hum louder. She pressed her palms together, whispering silently to herself, grounding her thoughts. You are more than this room. You are more than their doubt. You are Loretta's daughter. You are Maya Ellison. And then the door opened. Victoria Sloan entered, still in her pristine uniform, lips pressed tight. We've verified, she said briskly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, but it doesn't matter. We've decided this passenger will not be allowed back on board. For the comfort of others. Those words, for the comfort of others, sliced deep. Comfort had always been coded. It meant you make them uneasy. It meant you do not fit the picture we painted. Maya didn't flinch. She only nodded once. Then I'll find my own way, she said, inside. However, her mind was already calculating, not just the insult, not just the personal sting, but the impact, the hypocrisy, the opportunity. She thought of the dinner table waiting in New York, where Apex executives would make their pitch. She thought of the $5 billion commitment hanging on her signature, and she thought of her mother, Loretta, who had once cleaned offices of airlines for $10 an hour. Her hands cracked from chemicals. Maya's anger hardened into resolve. This was no longer about a seat. It was about a system. By the time she stepped out of that sterile room into the echo of the terminal, Olivia Chen was waiting, camera ready. Passengers who had seen the scene unfold were whispering, pointing. Maya walked steadily, as if the ground itself was waiting for her stride. She knew the storm outside was only beginning, and she was ready to meet it. The terminal at O'Hare was buzzing louder than usual. Travelers leaned against pillars with their phones raised, whispering, pointing. Some had caught only fragments of what happened, others had live streams replaying on loop. The clip was short, but damning a calm black woman in first class, standing as two officers marched her off. Maya Ellison kept walking. Her stride was even, measured, her carry-on rolling quietly behind her. She felt every pair of eyes on her. She felt the whispers, the half-formed judgments. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with suspicion. But she did not bow her head. What they didn't know was that she had learned to master this gaze long ago. As a girl, she'd walked through grocery aisles where clerks trailed her every step. In college, she'd faced professors who asked if she was in the right class. later, in boardrooms. She'd been mistaken for an assistant until she opened her laptop and dismantled billion-dollar projections with a single slide. The stares never ended. What changed was her response. She had trained herself to stand taller when the room pressed her smaller. At gate C-17, the boarding continued as if nothing had happened. Passengers avoided meeting her eye, shuffling quickly past. A young flight attendant lingered at the edge of the jet bridge. His badge read Noah Carter. He looked uneasy. Glancing between the gate agents and Maya, their eyes met briefly. For the first time that afternoon, Maya saw something different in someone's gaze: conflict, but also courage. Noah gave the faintest nod before turning back toward the aircraft. Meanwhile, across the terminal, Olivia Chen was broadcasting live again. Her voice carried urgency. This isn't just a mistake. This is systemic. This is a black woman who had a valid ticket, humiliated for the comfort of others. And for those who don't know, this isn't just anyone. This is Dr. Maya Ellison, CEO of Ellison Global Partners. She is scheduled to decide on a $5 billion investment in Apex Airways this week. Tonight, they showed her exactly what they think of her dignity. Her stream comments exploded. Unbelievable. Boycott Apex, flying while black. Retweets piled up. The story was no longer confined to gate C-17. It was spreading across timelines, news feeds, group chats. Maya didn't pull out her phone. She didn't need to. She could feel the current shifting around her, like the rumble before a storm. She paused near a wide glass window that overlooked the runway. Planes taxied under the fading sun, engines roaring, the city skyline glowing in the distance. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. Her mind flickered through what awaited in New York. She imagined Apex's executives rehearsing their pitches, polishing their smiles, ready to convince her that Apex deserved her firm's $5 billion. She wondered if Charles Davenport, the vice president of Apex, had any idea that one of his employees had just pulled his company into a storm of its own making. A gate announcement crackled overhead: final boarding for Flight 1287 to New York. That was her flight, the flight she had been dragged off of. The words stung, but they also sharpened her focus. Two children nearby tugged at their mother's sleeve, whispering. Maya caught fragments. Why did they take her off? Their mother hushed them quickly, but Maya offered the faintest smile. Children saw truth unfiltered. They knew something was wrong, even if adults tried to pretend otherwise. A man in a business suit approached cautiously. His voice was low, almost apologetic. Ms. Ellison, I saw what happened. I'm sorry. That wasn't right. He looked around nervously before retreating. Maya appreciated the gesture, though it underlined a familiar reality courage often whispered when it should have roared. She glanced at her watch, every minute that ticked away. Apex Airways' stock of credibility sank lower. Every second that passed, the footage spread wider. Maya wasn't plotting revenge. She was weighing justice. She was deciding how to align her personal pain with the power she carried. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. Loretta saw you on the news. Baby, are you all right? Maya's throat tightened. She typed back, I'm steady. Mama, don't worry. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. The weight of her mother's faith steadied her again. Loretta had scrubbed office floors in airports like this one, invisible to executives in suits who never knew her name. And now her daughter was in those same airports, carrying billions in her pen. Yet even with billions, she was still pulled aside, doubted, humiliated. That truth carried a bitter clarity. A sudden cheer rose from a cluster of onlookers. Maya turned slightly. On a large screen above the terminal, cable news had broken into the story. The chyron flashed, Black CEO removed from Apex Airways flight, airline under fire. The anchor's voice carried over the terminal speakers, unintentional and surreal. Maya closed her eyes briefly. She hadn't asked for this spotlight. She hadn't asked to become a headline, but she knew she could not shrink from it either. A few seats away, Olivia Chen was packing up her tripod, preparing to move closer. She caught Maya's eye and mouthed, "Are you okay?" Maya gave a small nod. It wasn't about being okay. It was about being ready. From the corner of her vision, she noticed Noah Carter again. The young attendant stood near the crew desk, whispering urgently to a supervisor. His face was pale, his jaw tight. She couldn't hear his words, but she could read his posture. He was troubled. She wondered if he would risk his job to tell the truth. The loudspeaker announced a gate change for another flight. People groaned, dragging their bags. Life in the terminal went on. But for Maya, time had shifted. She was no longer just a passenger waiting for boarding. She was the eye of a storm that was gathering speed by the minute. She rolled her shoulders back, lifted her chin, and began walking toward the exit. The hum of voices followed her, some murmuring, some cheering softly. Outside the terminal doors, the cool Chicago air hit her face. She inhaled deeply. Tonight, she would not dine with Apex Airways executives in Manhattan as planned. Tonight, she would prepare to tell the world what really happened at Gate C-17. And when she spoke, she would not just speak for herself. She would speak for everyone who had been told they did not belong in Seat 2A. The black SUV waiting at the curb felt like an anchor. Sleek and silent against the chaos of taxis and ride-shares crowding O'Hare's departure lane. Maya Ellison slid into the back seat, closing the door on the noise. For the first time in hours, the world around her grew quiet, leaving only the steady hum of the engine and the sound of her own breathing. Her driver, an older gentleman named Walter, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. He didn't ask questions, but his eyes carried concern. "Hotel or office?" "Ma'am, hotel," Maya said softly, her voice steady, though her chest still carried the tremor of humiliation. "The Langham, downtown." Walter nodded. He turned onto the Kennedy Expressway, the skyline of Chicago flickering like a promise in the distance. Maya leaned back, letting the city lights blur. She thought about the dinner she was supposed to be attending in New York. Apex Airways had reserved a private room at one of Manhattan's most exclusive steakhouses. The guest list had been carefully curated: Charles Davenport, several board members, and 2 senators who had quietly aligned themselves with Apex's expansion plan. The meal was meant to be more than food. It was theater, a staged performance of confidence and prestige, and Maya Apex had believed would be their audience. Now, the dinner was proceeding without her. She pictured them sipping Bordeaux, rehearsing their charm, waiting for her to walk through the door. They didn't yet know that their star guest had been escorted off their own plane like a trespasser. She almost pitied them. Almost. Her phone vibrated again. Dozens of missed calls, journalists, colleagues, even a few Apex executives. But one message stood out. It was from her chief of staff, Daniel Ruiz. "Do you want me to cancel tomorrow's board session?" Maya stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "No, move it up. Tenna, live stream." If Apex thought tonight's scandal could be managed behind closed doors, they were wrong. This would not be a quiet conversation over steak and wine. It would be daylight, cameras, questions that couldn't be ignored. Walter pulled up to the Langham, its glass facade glowing against the Chicago River. Maya stepped out into the cool air, her heels clicking against the pavement. Inside, the lobby's marble floors gleamed, every surface polished to a mirror. Guests glanced up briefly, then back down at their phones, unaware that the woman walking past them was about to ignite headlines across the nation. In her suite, she set her carry-on by the window and loosened her jacket. The city stretched before her, bridges lit like veins, traffic crawling like blood through arteries. She poured a glass of water, drank deeply, and let the silence settle. Then came the knock. She opened the door to find Olivia Chen, the journalist who had live-streamed everything. Her camera was slung over her shoulder now, phone still buzzing with alerts. "I shouldn't be here without asking," Olivia said quickly. "But I thought you'd want to know. The video's at 2 million views and climbing. Every major network's running it. #EllisonGate is trending #1 worldwide." Maya exhaled slowly. "That's not the headline I would have chosen." Olivia gave a rueful smile. "You don't get to pick your headlines, but you can choose what comes next." "Are you planning to speak publicly?" Maya studied her. Olivia wasn't just chasing a story. Her eyes carried something deeper: conviction, maybe, or belief that the truth mattered. Maya considered the question carefully before answering. "Yes, tomorrow." Olivia hesitated, then said softly, "If you want help framing it, I can." Maya raised a hand gently. "You've done enough already. You held up a mirror. Now the world has to look at it." For a long moment, silence filled the suite. Then Olivia nodded, as if accepting an unspoken pact. "I'll be there," she said, turning toward the elevator. When the door closed, Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her mind turned not to strategy but memory. She saw her father, David Ellison, a machinist who had once been escorted out of an airport security line after being mistaken for someone on a watch list. She had been 16, standing beside him, powerless as strangers treated him like a threat. She remembered his words that night, spoken with quiet steel one day. "Baby girl, you'll walk into places where they won't want you, and you'll stay there anyway, not because they let you, but because you belong." Tears pricked her eyes, but she let them fall. The humiliation she had felt hours ago was real, but so was the fire beneath it. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID read Charles Davenport. She considered ignoring it. Instead, she swiped to answer. "Maya." His voice rushed through, smooth but edged with panic. "I just landed in New York. I'm hearing rumors about an incident. Some kind of misunderstanding." "Not a misunderstanding," Maya said evenly. "Your airline pulled me off a flight I had every right to board." "Maya, listen. I can fix this. We'll fire whoever was responsible. We'll make a public apology. Don't let this derail what we've been building." "What you've been building," she corrected. "I haven't decided if I want to be part of it." "Maya, please," Davenport said, his charm cracking. "This is optics, that's all. Optics can be repaired. We both know business is about the long game, the $5 billion. Her voice cut through him, calm but unyielding. "Charles, business is also about values. And tonight, your company showed me exactly what yours are worth." Before he could respond, she ended the call. Her hand lingered on the phone, pulse steady. Outside, the city lights blurred once more. Tomorrow, she would no longer be a silent passenger. Tomorrow, she would be the storm. The next morning, sunlight cut across the Chicago skyline, sharp and golden, painting the Langhams' suite in warmth that felt almost out of place. Maya Ellison stood at the window in a simple navy dress, coffee untouched on the table beside her. She wasn't thinking about clothes or caffeine. She was thinking about the weight of what would happen at 10 a.m. Her boardroom wasn't a physical space today. It was a live stream. Daniel Ruiz, her chief of staff, had worked through the night setting up secure connections, coordinating with press outlets, and ensuring that every word spoken would ripple far beyond their investors. At 9:45, Daniel entered the suite carrying a tablet, his tie slightly crooked, dark circles under his eyes. "It's ready," he said, voice steady despite his fatigue. The feed is patched into every major business network. CNBC, Bloomberg, even CNN. The world is waiting. Maya turned from the window. Her face was calm, almost serene. Then, let's not keep them waiting. At precisely 10:00, the live stream began. Maya sat at the head of a polished oak table in the hotel's private conference room. Daniel beside her, a camera positioned discreetly at the far end. She leaned forward slightly, her voice measured but clear. "Good morning. My name is Dr. Maya Ellison, CEO of Ellison Global Partners. I want to begin by addressing an incident that occurred last night aboard an Apex Airways flight from Chicago to New York. I was removed from my seat and escorted off the plane without cause. Some have called it a misunderstanding. I call it what it is: discrimination." Her words hung in the air. Daniel watched the live chat explode with comments: outrage, disbelief, solidarity. The numbers on the screen ticked upward rapidly: 50,000 viewers, 100,000, 300,000. "I did not come here to recount my humiliation," Maya continued, "but to expose a pattern. Apex Airways has faced multiple discrimination lawsuits over the past 5 years. They have settled quietly, preferring to pay damages rather than confront their culture. Last night was not an accident. It was the visible tip of a system that tells people like me, and countless others, that we do not belong in first class or anywhere power resides." She paused, letting the silence speak before continuing. $5 billion. That is the investment Apex Airways sought from Ellison Global Partners. $5 billion that could have funded their international expansion. $5 billion that will now go elsewhere. The words landed like thunder. Daniel saw the chat scroll so fast it blurred. News outlets scrambled to break the story in real time. "But this is not just about Apex," Maya said, her eyes locking on the lens as though speaking directly to each viewer. "This is about every company that treats diversity as decoration rather than foundation. This is about every passenger who has been told they don't belong, every employee who has been silenced, every shareholder who has profited from exclusion. Today, I am saying enough." The conference room was silent except for the faint hum of the camera. Maya reached for the tablet in front of her and tapped. A screen behind her lit up with data lawsuit figures, internal emails leaked by whistleblowers, training slides that used coded language about protecting the premium image. "These are not rumors," Maya said. "These are Apex Airways' own documents, evidence of deliberate choices, evidence of values that are incompatible with ours." Daniel glanced at her, marveling again at her composure. She was not angry. She was resolute. The questions began pouring in from reporters patched into the live stream. One from the Wall Street Journal, Dr. Ellison. Are you suggesting this was corporate policy? I'm suggesting it was unofficial policy. Officially tolerated, she replied, and tolerance of injustice is complicity. A reporter from CNN followed. What would it take for you to reconsider investment? Maya folded her hands, her tone steady. Complete leadership change, independent oversight of all customer interactions, compensation for affected passengers, and legally binding diversity metrics with financial penalties for non-compliance. Not promises. Proof? The live chat erupted again. Investors, activists, ordinary travelers, everyone had an opinion, and all of them were watching her. Suddenly, a voice cut in from another connection. Charles Davenport. His face appeared on the split screen, strained but attempting charm. Dr. Ellison, with all due respect, this could have been handled privately. Airing grievances in this way damages not only Apex but the entire airline industry. Maya didn't flinch. Charles, the industry damages itself when it humiliates its passengers. Privacy has protected you for too long. Transparency is the only cure. You're destroying us, Davenport said, his mask slipping. No, Maya replied softly. You destroyed yourselves when you chose prejudice over principle. Daniel saw Davenport's image freeze. Either his connection had dropped or he had cut it himself. Either way, the message was clear. Apex was crumbling. Maya turned back to the camera. Let me end with this. Justice is not about revenge. It is about responsibility. Ellison Global Partners will continue to invest in companies that treat every customer, every employee, with dignity, and we will withdraw from those that do not. That is not politics. That is principle. She gave a small nod, and Daniel ended the stream. The silence afterward was heavy, filled only by the distant honk of traffic on Wabash Avenue. Daniel finally exhaled. You just detonated a bomb on live television. Maya leaned back, her face unreadable. No, I just told the truth. The bomb was already ticking. Within minutes, headlines began flooding in. Ellison withdraws 5 buyers from Apex Airways. CEO turns scandal into industry reckoning. Eater Justice at 30 OFT trends worldwide. Maya looked at the screen one last time before closing the tablet. Her heart was steady. Her decision final. There would be fallout. Of course, lawsuits, counterattacks, smears. But she was ready, because this wasn't just her fight. It was a fight for anyone who had ever been told to leave their seat. By late morning, the fallout from Maya Ellison's announcement had become impossible to contain. News networks ran rolling coverage. Social media exploded, and Apex Airways stock began a freefall that Wall Street hadn't seen in a decade. Maya sat in the hotel suite, reviewing emails and encrypted messages that had begun to pour in from whistleblowers within the airline. Daniel Ruiz tapped his laptop. Maya, you're going to want to see this. On the screen, hundreds of internal communications, photos, and videos had been submitted by anonymous employees. They documented years of discrimination, first-class passengers being forced to prove their identity while others were waved through, employees rewarded for denying upgrades to minority travelers, memos discussing ways to maintain the premium image. Maya scrolled carefully. Each file was a blow, a confirmation of what she already suspected. But the human stories, the small humiliations, were what cut the deepest. "There's a video from last month," Daniel said. "It shows a black executive being escorted off a plane for a technicality on her boarding pass, while a white passenger with the same issue was ignored." Maya paused, her finger hovering over the play button. She pressed it, and the screen flickered to life. The executive, composed despite the situation, pleaded calmly with the crew while security officers dismissed her concerns, insisting she leave. The sense of indignity was almost palpable. "I need to speak with these whistleblowers directly," Maya said quietly, more to herself than to Daniel. "We need first-hand accounts to build the narrative, to ensure no one can dismiss this as hearsay." Over the next few hours, she spoke with flight attendants, pilots, and ground staff. A young Blackgate agent named Naomi Fields shared her story. "I've been told to let certain passengers slide while others get questioned endlessly," she said, her voice trembling. "I stayed silent because I feared losing my job. But this, what you're doing, it gives us a chance to be heard." Maya nodded. "Your voice matters. Naomi, every report you make is a piece of truth that exposes the system." Meanwhile, Daniel coordinated with a legal team, preparing for the inevitable corporate pushback. Apex's board would try to spin, to deny, to smear, but the growing evidence, the whistleblowers, and Maya's measured but resolute presentation had created momentum that could not be contained. By early afternoon, Apex executives were on damage control. Charles Davenport called, his voice strained and defensive. "Dr. Ellison, you're making this personal. We can talk privately. I've tried private." "Charles," Maya interrupted, her tone calm but firm. "Private conversations didn't stop last night. Private conversations didn't stop the repeated discrimination. This is bigger than you, or Apex. It's about accountability." Davenport hesitated. "You don't understand the consequences I understand perfectly," Maya replied. "The consequence of inaction is what we are seeing now. The consequence of discrimination is financial, reputational, and moral collapse. Your company is hemorrhaging because you chose to protect bias over justice." Later, Maya convened a virtual meeting with her senior advisors and the team of whistleblowers. Each shared stories and documents, piecing together a pattern of systemic failures. There were training manuals with coded instructions, emails from management praising staff for denying upgrades to non-white passengers, even financial reports showing settlements quietly paid out to avoid public scrutiny. Maya listened silently, taking notes, absorbing the enormity of what she held in her hands. Her calm exterior masked the surge of emotion inside, a mix of anger, sorrow, and steely resolve. She thought of the countless passengers who had been humiliated, the employees silenced, and the investors misled. She spoke up finally. "We're going to create a comprehensive report. It will include first-hand accounts, video evidence, internal documents, and financial implications. This will not just expose Apex. It will serve as a blueprint for accountability across the industry." Daniel interjected, "We should consider timing. We want maximum impact." Maya nodded. "We release it before the next earnings call, before the board has a chance to spin their narrative. The world needs to see the truth, unfiltered." Over the next 24 hours, the team worked tirelessly. The report was compiled, meticulously fact-checked, and formatted for public release. Each section was carefully structured: the human stories first, then the corporate evidence, followed by financial analysis, and finally recommendations for reform. When it was ready, Maya recorded a short video introducing the report. Her message was concise, heartfelt, and firm. This is not about revenge. This is about justice. It is about creating a future where every passenger, regardless of race, is treated with dignity. Apex Airways can choose to confront its past or continue to let prejudice define it. The choice is theirs, but the world is watching. The report was released publicly at 9 a.m. EST. Within minutes, the story went viral. Hashtags like #JeerJustice, @30KFT, Accountability Matters, and Maya Ellison trended worldwide. Investors panicked, stocks plummeted, and Apex PR team struggled to respond. Journalists flooded Maya with interview requests, but she remained focused. Each conversation reinforced the same message: systemic change, transparency, and accountability. She wasn't interested in personal fame. Her mission was larger. By evening, Apex Airways had convened an emergency board meeting. Reports from media, whistleblowers, and legal teams painted a damning picture. Several senior executives were placed on leave, and an internal investigation was announced. But Maya knew the fight wasn't over. The structural reforms needed to go beyond personnel changes. They required a complete transformation of corporate culture. That night, Maya returned to her hotel suite, exhausted but resolute. She opened a message from Naomi Fields. "Thank you, Dr. Ellison. Today, I finally feel seen. We finally have a voice." Maya smiled faintly. "This is just the beginning. Naomi, today was exposure. Tomorrow, we ensure accountability. And someday soon, we'll create a world where no one has to fear their seat or their voice being dismissed." Outside, the city lights of Chicago shimmered, reflecting off the wet streets. Maya sat quietly, letting the magnitude of the day sink in. She had struck the first blow in what promised to be a long, arduous battle. But with evidence, courage, and relentless resolve, she knew change was not just possible, it was inevitable. The next morning, Maya Ellison awoke early, her mind still running over the avalanche of evidence and responses from the previous day. Chicago's skyline gleamed through her suite window, but the city's morning energy did little to calm her racing thoughts. She poured herself a cup of coffee, sitting at the desk cluttered with notes, emails, and flash drives filled with Apex Airways' internal documents. Daniel Ruiz walked in, holding his tablet. "Dr. Ellison, the investor responses are coming in. They're intense." Maya looked up, her calm demeanor masking the weight she carried. "Show me." The tablet lit up with messages from several major investment groups. Some congratulated her for exposing systemic injustice. Others demanded immediate action or threatened to withdraw planned funding. But one stood out: a confidential message from Ellison Global Partners Board, the institutional investors who had entrusted her with the $5 billion earmarked for Apex Airways expansion. Maya read aloud. "Given the evidence presented, and in light of Apex's ongoing refusal to address structural inequities, we recommend withholding the $5 billion investment unless substantial reforms are committed to immediately, including board restructuring, independent oversight, and legally binding diversity and inclusion metrics." Her eyes narrowed. This was exactly the leverage she needed. Apex had underestimated her resolve, assuming her silence was negotiable, but they hadn't anticipated a CEO willing to transform a financial decision into a moral imperative. Daniel leaned closer. "They'll see it as a corporate assassination." Maya shook her head. "No, this is accountability. Apex has been profiting from exclusion for years. Now, the consequences are real." By mid-morning, she convened a video conference with Apex Airways top executives. Charles Davenport appeared first, his tone defensive. "Dr. Ellison, you've gone too far. This is financial sabotage." Maya's voice was steady, measured, but carried the gravity of her authority. "I'm not here to sabotage. I'm here to demand accountability. Your airline has a choice reform or face the consequences of inaction. And today, that choice is clear. $5 billion in funding will not be delivered until you demonstrate substantial, measurable changes. This isn't punitive. This is a test of your integrity." There was a tense silence. Davenport's hand hovered over his microphone. "You're bluffing." "I'm not," Maya replied. "Every report, every whistleblower, every video you ignored, all of it leads to one undeniable conclusion: Apex Airways tolerates, condones, and in some cases rewards discrimination. My investors, my team, and I will not support that. Period." She could see the tension ripple through the virtual room. The senior executives exchanged nervous glances. Maya continued, detailing the specific reforms required. 1. Immediate termination of executives directly responsible for discriminatory practices. 2. Appointment of an independent oversight committee to audit all customer interactions and complaints for at least 2 years. 3. Transparent reporting of discrimination, complaints to a public database accessible to passengers and regulatory bodies. 4. Implementation of legally binding diversity metrics, with financial penalties for noncompliance. Davenport's face went pale. "Dr. Ellison, that would cost us hundreds of millions, perhaps more. The board will never agree." "Then you understand the stakes," Maya interrupted, her calm yet commanding tone leaving no room for misinterpretation. "The $5 billion investment, which Apex has relied on for expansion and credibility, is conditional. This is not negotiation. This is accountability." Minutes stretched into tension-filled silence. Finally, a voice spoke from the back. "Lydia Hargrove, Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Ellison. If we fail to comply, what then? You fail." Maya replied simply, "The world is watching. Your investors, your passengers, your employees, they will see what kind of company Apex truly is. You can choose to be leaders of change or witnesses to collapse." By afternoon, the news had leaked, social media erupted, hashtags like Apex Reckoning, Justice at 30KFT, and Maya Ellison trended nationally. The public's attention amplified the pressure, turning a corporate dispute into a social reckoning. Maya spent the next hours coordinating with her legal team to draft formal letters to Apex and other investors, outlining the conditions and setting firm deadlines. She also monitored internal communications from whistleblowers who expressed both fear and hope. Naomi Fields sent a message that made Maya pause. "I never thought I'd see the day when someone with your reach actually used power to protect people like me. It feels like justice, finally." Maya allowed herself a small, rare smile. "It's not done yet, Naomi. But today, it starts." Evening came, and the city lights reflected off the Lake Michigan waters. Maya walked along the balcony of her suite, reflecting on the day's events. She thought of every passenger humiliated, every employee silenced, and the countless unseen moments of prejudice. The responsibility weighed heavily, yet she felt an unusual calm. She was taking action, not just exposing injustice, but actively reshaping the system. The next morning, Apex Airways Board convened an emergency meeting. Pressure from the public, investors, and media had reached a fever pitch. Patricia Lawrence, Apex's board chair, looked exhausted as she addressed her colleagues. We underestimated her. The $5 billion is more than capital. It's leverage for accountability. If we do not act, the consequences will be catastrophic. By late morning, word came to Maya. Apex had begun implementing changes, a comprehensive leadership review, removal of executives implicated in discriminatory practices, and preliminary steps toward independent oversight. Her $5 billion decision had not only halted expansion, but forced the company to confront the moral and financial cost of decades of negligence. Later that evening, Maya and Daniel gathered in the hotel suite, reviewing the latest communications. Naomi Fields called. "Dr. Ellison, thank you. Today, it feels like our voices matter. For the first time, I feel like someone is really listening." Maya's eyes softened. "We've started the process, Naomi, but it's not just about today. It's about sustained action. We hold them accountable, and we ensure no one else has to endure what you have." Outside, the city hummed with activity, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding within its corporate towers. Maya knew this was only the beginning, but the $5 billion decision had sent an unmistakable message. Injustice carries a price, and those who wield power must answer for how they use it. By the next morning, news outlets across the country had caught wind of Maya Ellison's decision. Headlines screamed Black CEO halts $5 billion funding over airline discrimination, and Apex Airways faces moral and financial reckoning. Social media was ablaze with posts, videos, and commentaries. Maya watched it all from her suite, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. The work was only beginning. Daniel Ruiz entered, a tablet in hand. "Maya, it's spreading faster than we anticipated. Investor calls, media requests, activist groups, they all want to weigh in." Maya nodded. "Good. The more attention, the harder it is for them to ignore the truth." At 10:00 a.m., a press conference was arranged outside Apex's headquarters in downtown Chicago. Maya stood behind the podium, her posture calm, commanding, her signature navy blazer immaculate. A sea of reporters and camera crews swarmed around her. "Dr. Ellison," a reporter shouted from the crowd, "how do you respond to accusations that you've taken this too far?" Maya's gaze swept the audience. "I'm not here to punish Apex Airways. I'm here to demand accountability. Their failure to address systemic discrimination has harmed passengers, employees, and the community at large. The $5 billion investment isn't a punishment. It's leverage for justice." She pressed play on a screen behind her, showing carefully curated clips from Apex's internal communications and security footage, illustrating repeated discriminatory incidents against passengers of color. Each clip elicited gasps, murmurs, and in some cases, audible outrage from the assembled press. "Your airline has tolerated discrimination for decades," Maya continued, her voice unwavering. "Now, the world is watching to see whether you will change or continue to prioritize profit over people." Among the crowd, Naomi Fields watched, a small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in years, she felt seen. She remembered the first time she had been pulled aside, humiliated, for no reason other than the color of her skin. Today, she was witnessing justice in motion. The press conference escalated when Charles Davenport attempted to defend Apex. "Dr. Ellison, we have diversity policies in place. Some incidents were misunderstandings. We are committed to change." Maya lifted her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Policies on paper mean nothing without action. You have ignored complaints, rewarded those who perpetuated prejudice, and allowed a culture of fear to silence your employees. The world will no longer accept half measures. Reporters quickly began typing updates, live streaming the confrontation. Every word Maya spoke was amplified across platforms. Within minutes, hashtags like Justice at 30 KFT and Maya Ellison were trending nationally. The public reaction was swift and intense outrage, support, and calls for other companies to examine their own practices. By late afternoon, Apex Airways convened an emergency board meeting. Patricia Lawrence, the board chair, appeared visibly distressed. We underestimated the impact of Ellison Global Partners' decision. She admitted, this is no longer just a financial matter. Public trust, regulatory scrutiny, and social responsibility are now on the line. Lydia Hargrove, the COO, leaned forward. We have no choice. We must act decisively, or we risk losing our reputation entirely. Within hours, Apex issued a public statement announcing immediate internal reforms termination of executives implicated in discriminatory practices, formation of an independent oversight committee, and commitment to transparent reporting of all customer discrimination complaints. Maya watched the announcement with quiet satisfaction, but did not celebrate. She knew transformation required vigilance. Discrimination had become systemic over decades. It would take consistent, relentless effort to dismantle it. Later that evening, Maya received a call from Naomi. Dr. Ellison, thank you. Today felt like a turning point. I feel like people finally understand what it's like, what we've been living through. Maya's voice softened. This is just the beginning. Naomi, our work isn't done. We will monitor their progress, ensure compliance, and support employees and passengers who face discrimination. Change doesn't happen overnight. Maya then began planning her next steps. She instructed Daniel to coordinate with legal teams, human resources consultants, and independent auditors. Each layer of planning was meticulous. They mapped out procedures for undercover audits, employee interviews, and passenger surveys. The goal was clear: verify that Apex's reforms were real and enforceable. During a quiet moment, Maya reflected on her journey. She thought about the countless moments she had endured microaggressions, dismissive attitudes, and outright hostility as a black CEO navigating industries dominated by white leadership. Yet all of that had forged her resilience, her ability to remain calm under pressure, and her deep empathy for those marginalized by systemic bias. She remembered a flight 3 years prior, where she'd been pulled from a plane despite holding a valid ticket, humiliated in front of passengers, and subjected to indignities that left her questioning the fairness of corporate America. That experience had ignited a determination not just to survive but to confront systemic injustice. Daniel watched her, noting her pensive expression. "You're carrying so much. Maya, how do you keep going?" She smiled faintly. "Because I have to, not for me, but for everyone who doesn't have a voice yet. If I falter, someone else suffers. If I act, we can change the system." That night, Maya prepared a briefing for Ellison Global Partners investors, outlining the conditions for future funding and emphasizing that the $5 billion decision was more than a financial maneuver. It was a moral stance that set a precedent for accountability in corporate America. As she reviewed the documents, a message popped up from a whistleblower within Apex Airways. "Thank you for finally giving us hope. We've been afraid to speak for years." Maya paused, reading the words carefully. "Hope," she whispered. "That's the real currency here." She leaned back in her chair, gazing at the Chicago skyline. The city lights flickered like distant stars, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a world where every passenger could travel with dignity, where employees could speak out without fear, and where corporate policies aligned with human decency. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but Maya Ellison was ready. She had leveraged her position not just to expose wrongdoing, but to initiate a profound cultural transformation, one that would ripple across industries, inspiring others to hold corporations accountable and redefining what true leadership meant in the modern era. The following morning, Maya arrived at Apex Airways corporate headquarters in downtown Chicago. The glass doors reflected her calm yet determined expression. Inside, the boardroom had been cleared for an emergency session with all executives and board members present. Cameras were barred, but the tension was palpable. Patricia Lawrence, the board chair, rose as Maya entered. "Dr. Ellison, thank you for coming. We want to address the concerns raised yesterday and demonstrate our commitment to reform." Maya nodded. "I appreciate that, but I need to see a concrete plan, not just promises." She placed her tablet on the polished mahogany table, showing the clips and documentation of discriminatory incidents collected by Naomi Fields. Heads of departments shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some avoiding her gaze. Charles Davenport attempted to speak first. "Dr. Ellison, while I acknowledge past issues, we have diversity policies in place. Some incidents were isolated. We are committed to change." Maya raised her hand, stopping him. "Your policies weren't enough when your employees could ignore complaints and still get promoted. Policies on paper are meaningless without enforcement and accountability. Your culture rewarded those who perpetuated discrimination. That is the problem." She tapped her tablet, displaying a slide detailing repeated complaints, security footage, and internal emails. These aren't isolated incidents. This is systematic. And this is why Ellison Global Partners has withheld $5 billion in funding until you implement meaningful reform. Lydia Hargrove, the COO, shifted nervously. "Dr. Ellison, what would you consider meaningful? We want to comply, but some demands may be costly and disruptive." Maya leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. "Immediate removal of executives directly responsible. Independent oversight of all customer service interactions for at least 2 years. Legally binding diversity metrics with penalties for non-compliance, and transparent reporting accessible to the public. Anything less fails the passengers, employees, and shareholders alike." Patricia Lawrence exhaled sharply. 2 years. That's unprecedented. We can restructure teams, but this level of monitoring is extreme. Maya's eyes didn't waver. Extreme is what it takes when a company has normalized discrimination for decades. You can either adapt or face ongoing scrutiny, continued public outrage, and legal consequences. At that moment, Naomi Fields entered quietly, carrying a folder of additional documentation. "Maya, I've included recent internal reports showing continued bias among some senior staff despite previous warnings. They must be addressed immediately." The room went silent. Executives glanced at one another, their confidence visibly shaken. Maya continued. "The world is watching, and every decision you make now will define whether Apex Airways survives or collapses under its own systemic failures." Accountability is non-negotiable. Charles Davenport, red-faced and flustered, attempted one final defense. Dr. Ellison, you're overstepping. These are internal matters. Investors, regulators. Maya's tone sharpened. Internal matters that have public consequences. Every passenger humiliated, every employee silenced, every lawsuit quietly settled. You've gambled with lives and reputations. I am merely holding you accountable. Your refusal to act in the past has consequences. Patricia Lawrence finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. We understand. We will comply with your recommendations. Starting today, the board will restructure immediately, and we will retain external auditors to oversee all changes. Maya nodded, her face calm but resolute. Good. I will be monitoring progress closely. Ellison Global Partners investment remains contingent on real, measurable change. Anything less is unacceptable. As the boardroom emptied, Maya lingered for a moment, reviewing the slide deck and documentation. She reflected on how far she had come since that humiliating day on the plane when security had pulled her aside. The memory of being disregarded, judged solely for the color of her skin, fueled her resolve. Daniel Ruiz, who had been quietly observing, leaned over. Maya, it's remarkable. They actually listened. She gave a small, tired smile. They have no choice. Daniel, the work doesn't end here. Policies must translate into action, or the cycle repeats. Real change is relentless. In the following days, Apex Airways began issuing public statements acknowledging past failures and outlining their reforms. Employees received training on anti-discrimination practices, and a confidential hotline was established for reporting misconduct. Maya's team coordinated with Apex HR to ensure transparency and accountability. Maya also took time to speak directly with several frontline employees who had previously witnessed or experienced discrimination. Their stories reinforced the need for continuous vigilance. One flight attendant recounted being told to monitor passengers of color differently than others. Another gate agent revealed how complaints were routinely dismissed. Maya documented everything meticulously, ensuring no incident went unnoticed. Late one evening, Maya received a call from Naomi. Dr. Ellison, I just got off the line with the flight attendant. He was terrified of retaliation, but he finally spoke up. He said your action yesterday gave him courage to report what he'd witnessed for years. Maya's voice softened. This is why we do it. Change isn't just corporate policy. It's given people the power to demand dignity and fairness. That night, Maya stood by her hotel window, looking out over the Chicago skyline. The city lights shimmered like stars, reflecting the countless people whose lives had been affected by discrimination. She thought about the passengers, the employees, and the broader systemic inequities that had gone unchecked for too long. She knew that this confrontation was only the first step. Apex's leadership had been forced to face their failures, but real transformation would require sustained effort, ongoing audits, and continued advocacy. Every decision, every policy, every action would matter. Maya closed her eyes, allowing herself a brief moment of reflection. The memory of being removed from that plane, the humiliation, the anger, the disbelief had become a catalyst. It had ignited a movement that demanded corporate accountability, championed diversity, and placed dignity at the forefront of business practices. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel appeared. Maya, We have confirmation that Apex's board has formally accepted all our conditions. They're assembling the oversight committee starting Monday." She smiled faintly. "Good. But this is only the beginning. Tomorrow, we follow up, every week, every month, until these changes are irreversible." The morning after the boardroom confrontation, Maya Ellison arrived at Ellison Global Partners offices in downtown Chicago. The sun glinted off the glass facade, but her focus was elsewhere. The news from Apex Airways board had spread rapidly. Reporters, social media posts, and airline investors were all abuzz with the story of the $5 billion funding withheld and the sweeping reforms demanded. Daniel Ruiz met her at the lobby, holding a stack of press clippings. "Maya, the coverage is exploding. Headlines everywhere. Social media engagement is through the roof. People are calling you a game changer." Maya gave a small, measured smile. "It's not about me. It's about forcing corporations to confront what's been hidden for decades. Discrimination isn't just unethical, it's profitable for them if ignored. Now, we make accountability costly." Meanwhile, Naomi Fields was coordinating with reporters and civil rights organizations. Her undercover documentation from Apex flights was being aired for the first time in a controlled, strategic release. Video clips showed employees treating passengers differently, based solely on race. Emails revealing plans to uphold premium cabin standards, and internal meetings where complaints were quietly buried. Maya and Naomi prepared a joint statement for the press. "This is not about revenge," Maya read aloud, "but about accountability, dignity, and fairness. Apex Airways now has the opportunity to lead, but only if actions follow words. We will monitor, audit, and enforce transparency." Within hours, the news was everywhere. Tweets, live news segments, and national newspapers focused on the story. Some headlines declared, "Black CEO halts 5-by funding, forces airline reform," while others highlighted the personal courage of Naomi Fields. At the same time, Apex Airways' stock began to fluctuate dramatically. Investors panicked, realizing that continued public scrutiny could jeopardize billions in value. Charles Davenport and Lydia Hargrove were fielding constant calls, their stress levels palpable. Every email and every phone ring was a reminder that the company's reputation and their careers were at stake. Maya used this media momentum to call an emergency virtual press briefing with major news outlets, on camera. Her voice was calm but resolute. What happened on Apex flights wasn't an anomaly. It was a reflection of systemic failure, tolerated at the highest levels. Our audit is just the beginning. Companies across all industries must ask themselves, are you prioritizing profit over the dignity of your customers? A reporter from Bloomberg asked, "Dr. Ellison, some executives say you're overstepping, that private companies should manage their own policies." "What do you say?" Maya responded firmly. "Private companies exist to serve the public. When discrimination affects that public, it's no longer a private matter, it's a public harm, and the public has a right to demand accountability." Later that afternoon, Maya returned calls from civil rights organizations and investor groups. Every conversation reinforced the fact that systemic reform would ripple far beyond Apex Airways. Advocacy groups planned to use the documentation for broader campaigns. Investors were now scrutinizing diversity metrics as a critical component of corporate valuation. At home, that evening, Maya sat with Daniel, reviewing the footage and documentation. "I keep thinking about the passengers, the families, The business travelers, the young professionals who never understood why they were treated differently. She said quietly. Daniel nodded, and now they're seeing that their experience matters, that someone is holding these companies accountable. You've changed the game. Maya leaned back, closing her eyes. I hope so, but it can't stop with Apex. There are countless other airlines, hotels, and transportation companies doing the same thing, quietly. The following week, the story escalated further. Multiple passengers who had experienced discrimination came forward, sharing their stories in interviews. Their testimonies echoed Naomi's recordings, revealing patterns of bias long hidden under corporate veneers. Social media amplified these accounts, sparking national conversations about discrimination, corporate culture, and accountability. Meanwhile, inside Apex Airways, employees began to speak up. Several flight attendants and gate agents contacted Naomi, expressing relief that someone had given them permission to report misconduct without fear. Their internal testimonies corroborated Maya's findings, exposing a network of unofficial policies that reinforced racial bias. On a conference call with board members, Maya made her expectations clear. We are tracking every action taken to address discrimination. Independent auditors will review every interaction, every complaint, and every resolution. We will not accept excuses. Leadership is accountable at every level. Patricia Lawrence, still recovering from the boardroom humiliation, finally acknowledged Maya's authority. We understand. Dr. Ellison, we will comply. This is the change our company needs. Outside, social media campaigns gained momentum. Hashtags like dignity in flight and accountable airlines began trending. People shared stories of microaggressions, denied upgrades, and other discriminatory experiences, amplifying public awareness and pressure for systemic reform. Amid this whirlwind, Naomi Fields received a personal message from a young passenger she had helped months earlier. Because of you, my father wasn't harassed on a flight last week. He finally felt safe. Thank you. Naomi showed it to Maya. This is why we do it, she said softly. Maya nodded. Every story matters. Every individual who's treated fairly adds weight to the movement. This is about changing culture, not just headlines. That night, Maya and Daniel reviewed a long-term plan. They strategized how to extend audits to other industries, preparing for the inevitable pushback from companies resistant to change. Maya's vision was clear, sustained accountability, systemic reform, and empowerment of those silenced for too long. As Maya looked out over the Chicago skyline, the city lights flickering like beacons of progress, she reflected on the journey from humiliation on that plane to public exposure and corporate accountability. The transformation of Apex Airways was just the beginning. Every step, every action, every report contributed to a larger movement, one that demanded that dignity be recognized as a right, not a privilege. The morning sun cast a soft glow over Manhattan as Maya Ellison entered the conference room of Ellison Global Partners. Today's meeting was unlike any other. They were reviewing the fallout from the Apex Airways expose and planning the next moves for broader systemic audits. Daniel Ruiz was already seated, laptop open, reviewing media coverage. Maya, it's incredible, Daniel said, scrolling through a live feed of news channels. The public reaction is overwhelming. Hashtag dignity in flight is trending globally. Investors, advocacy groups, even politicians are paying attention. This is bigger than Apex. Maya nodded, her face calm but focused. "I know, but big movements start with individual actions. Apex is just the first domino. Now we have to ensure the next ones fall correctly." Meanwhile, across the country, Apex Airways headquarters were in chaos. Employees whispered in hallways, unsure of what would happen next. Flight attendants and gate agents who had long endured discrimination felt empowered to speak out. Internal emails flooded the HR inbox, some anonymous, some signed with real names, detailing years of misconduct. Lydia Hargrove, Apex COO, tried to hold the team together. "We must stay calm and professional," she instructed managers. "Every complaint will be investigated thoroughly. We cannot allow emotions to dictate our response." Charles Davenport paced in his office, phone glued to his ear. Investors wanted assurances. Executives demanded answers. And the press were relentless. Every step forward seemed to trigger new problems. "How did it get this far?" he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Back at Ellison Global Partners, Maya and Naomi Fields reviewed the detailed reports submitted by employees. The scale of the misconduct was staggering. Over 50 incidents documented internally, spanning years and including multiple instances of racial profiling and deliberate exclusion from premium services. "This isn't just about Apex Airways," Naomi said, her voice steady but heavy. "It's an industry-wide problem. Airlines, hotels, even credit services have systems that quietly discriminate. This documentation can be the blueprint for a nationwide reform." Maya agreed. "We have leverage now. We can use this to implement systematic audits, public accountability reports, and, most importantly, a framework that holds leadership personally responsible." They coordinated a strategy session with civil rights organizations, investors, and media consultants. Their objective: transform public outrage into tangible, enforceable change. The team discussed how to roll out audits in other airlines, ensuring that each operation would be discreet yet impactful, combining undercover assessments, employee interviews, and customer feedback. Within days, other major airlines began announcing emergency internal reviews, citing public pressure and investor concerns. Some executives released statements expressing regret and promising reforms. Others, more cautious, questioned the methodology but couldn't ignore the growing wave of scrutiny. Meanwhile, Maya received a call from the Department of Transportation. "Dr. Ellison, your findings have prompted federal interest," an official said. "We're considering new legislation and oversight mechanisms for airlines and commercial transportation. Your input is critical." Maya felt a familiar weight settle over her shoulders. The responsibility was immense. "I'll work with your team," she replied, "but it needs to be comprehensive, enforceable, and transparent. Half measures won't suffice." As the days progressed, Maya and Naomi coordinated with a growing network of whistleblowers. Employees from different airlines reached out, sharing stories of bias and unfair treatment. One senior flight attendant, Marcus Hayes, confided in Naomi. "I've seen crew members refuse service to passengers based on race or nationality. No one ever challenged it until now." Naomi listened, carefully documenting each account. "We'll make sure your testimony is heard," she assured him. "This is how change starts, by lifting the silence that has protected these practices for too long." Maya also faced internal conflicts. While she was resolute externally, privately she grappled with moments of doubt. Could the reforms truly stick? Would companies revert once public attention faded? She confided in Daniel one evening. "I keep thinking about all the executives who will resist. They'll fight back, downplay, or rebrand their discrimination in subtler ways. Are we prepared for the long game?" she asked. Daniel paused, thoughtful. Change is never instantaneous, but every step, every story we uncover makes it harder for them to revert. We're creating accountability structures that outlast public attention. The week culminated in a live-streamed press conference. Maya and Naomi stood side by side, projecting confidence and calm. Behind them, screens displayed key statistics: number of documented discrimination cases, settlements paid, and stories from affected passengers. "This is more than a story about one airline," Maya said. "It's about an entire industry that has tolerated injustice because it was profitable or convenient. Today, we are making clear that tolerance of discrimination comes with consequences: financial, legal, and reputational." Reporters asked about Apex Airways' $5 billion funding freeze. Naomi responded, "It's a measure to ensure accountability. Funding will be reinstated only when demonstrable reforms are in place, verified by independent audits. Money must be tied to action, not words." Outside the conference room, the public response was immediate. Social media erupted with discussion, shares, and commentary. People expressed relief that someone with influence and integrity was challenging entrenched corporate practices. For the first time, passengers who had felt powerless began to see a path toward justice. At home that evening, Maya reflected quietly. She thought about the countless stories she had heard: families segregated in lounges, travelers questioned about their tickets because of their appearance, employees fearful to speak out. Each story fueled her determination. Daniel handed her a note from Naomi. "A young passenger wrote this because of you. I know my family will never feel second class in the sky again." Maya's eyes softened. "This is why we do it," she whispered, "not for headlines, but for them." The following days saw a ripple effect. Airlines across the country initiated voluntary audits. Investors began evaluating companies based on diversity and inclusion metrics. Civil rights organizations mobilized to support employees speaking out. Maya and Naomi's actions had set off a chain reaction, a domino effect that threatened to transform corporate culture nationwide. Yet Maya remained vigilant. "We've started the movement," she told Daniel, "but the fight isn't over. Discrimination is persistent. It will adapt, and so must we." Maya spent the night drafting long-term strategic plans. She envisioned a network of equity auditors, empowered employees, and public reporting systems. Each component designed to ensure that fairness and dignity became fundamental, measurable aspects of corporate practice. By dawn, Maya felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, tempered with resolve. Apex Airways' case had proven that accountability could be enforced, that courage could topple entrenched systems, but the real victory would be the slow, steady transformation of corporate America. One audit, one testimony, one policy at a time. The tension at Apex Airways headquarters had reached a breaking point. Security cameras in the corporate lounge showed a pattern of incidents, all now under public scrutiny. Maya Ellison entered the building with Naomi Fields by her side. Both women carried a quiet determination, fully aware that today would be pivotal. Inside the executive conference room, Apex's top leadership sat in uneasy silence. Charles Davenport fidgeted with a pen, while Lydia Hargrove avoided eye contact. Scanning the reports spread across the table, Patricia Lawrence, the board chair, sat rigidly, her expression a mix of apprehension and defiance. Maya cleared her throat. "We've collected irrefutable evidence of discrimination in your airline," she began, her voice steady yet commanding. "These are not isolated incidents, they are systemic, and until you address them, funding, partnerships, and public confidence are all on hold." Naomi stepped forward, projecting the first video clip. The footage showed a black passenger being questioned repeatedly by gate staff despite a verified first-class ticket. Another clip displayed a Latino family being moved from their seats to make room for white passengers. The room was silent, every eye fixed on the screen. Charles Davenport swallowed hard. These are mistakes," he stammered. "We'll correct them," Maya interrupted sharply. "Mistakes? Over 50 documented incidents. Mistakes happen once or twice. This is deliberate, coordinated, and tolerated at multiple levels of management. Your policies were paper promises, unenforced and ignored." Patricia Lawrence finally spoke, her voice tense. "We've been implementing diversity training. We, Naomi, cut in. Training that's ignored is useless. Policies that aren't enforced are meaningless. The reality is that your leadership allowed this to continue. And today, the consequences are clear. $5 billion in funding is frozen until we see measurable reforms." The executives shifted uncomfortably. Lydia Hargrove leaned back, trying to regain composure. "Maya, this is unprecedented. You can't just..." Maya's gaze was unwavering. "I can. Because this is not about personal vendettas. This is about accountability. Every corporate partner, every investor now knows that discriminatory practices carry real consequences. Your leadership can either embrace change or be replaced," Naomi added. "And change is not optional. Independent audits will verify every step, every policy, every hiring and promotion decision. Transparency will be mandatory." The room's silence was broken by the soft buzz of mobile phones. News alerts were flooding in, employees streaming live reactions on social media, hashtags trending faster than anyone in the room could track. The pressure was palpable. Charles Davenport excused himself and stepped into the hallway. Pacing, he felt trapped, funding was withheld, the board was watching, and his own credibility was collapsing. "How did it get this far?" he muttered. Meanwhile, Maya and Naomi met with Marcus Hayes, the senior flight attendant who had risked his career to provide insider testimony. "Marcus, your courage gave other employees the strength to come forward," Maya said. "Now, we need your help guiding the next phase, ensuring employees are protected and heard." Marcus nodded, determination lighting his features. "I've seen the damage. People are afraid to speak, but if they know there's a system protecting them, they'll talk. That's how change spreads." Back in the conference room, Patricia Lawrence made a bold proposal. "We can implement new training modules, hire a diversity officer, create anonymous reporting." "Isn't that enough?" Maya's response was firm. "No, this isn't about optics. This is about accountability and cultural transformation. You need leadership change, independent oversight, and legally binding commitments. Anything less is performative." The air grew heavier. Each executive understood that resistance would not only fail, but would expose them further. The weight of public scrutiny and impending legal ramifications made the decision inevitable. Suddenly, Naomi raised a crucial point. "We've also identified collusion between certain managers to maintain what they called premium cabin integrity, a euphemism for excluding minority passengers. Those responsible will be held accountable. Patricia Lawrence paled, realizing the extent of her oversight failures. We didn't know it was this bad," she whispered. Maya's voice softened but remained firm. "You may not have known, but you had the power to enforce change, and an action is still a choice with consequences." After hours of discussion, a plan emerged. Charles Davenport and several top executives would be replaced immediately. Independent auditors would oversee all corporate and operational procedures. Mandatory reporting mechanisms would be implemented, with financial penalties tied to non-compliance. Naomi stepped aside, letting Maya conclude, "This is your chance to rebuild, not just for public relations, not just to regain funding, but to become the company you claimed to be. The world is watching, and so are the people you serve." As the meeting ended, employees began coming forward to submit additional reports, emboldened by the leadership's visible accountability. Marcus Hayes guided them, ensuring confidentiality and protection. "You're not alone anymore," he told them. Maya reflected quietly as she left the building, her phone buzzing with congratulatory messages from investors, civil rights organizations, and even strangers who had been following the story. Despite the progress, she knew the work had only begun. Systemic discrimination was entrenched and would require sustained vigilance. That night, Naomi Fields reviewed the day's footage and reports, feeling the weight of the responsibility they carried. She thought of every passenger who had been humiliated, every employee who had been silent out of fear. She whispered to herself, "We'll make sure it never happens again." Maya, at home, leaned against her desk window, looking at the city lights. Each illuminated office was a reminder that the systems they were challenging existed everywhere. But she felt a surge of hope. One decisive action, when done correctly, could catalyze transformation. Apex Airways had become the spark. Now it was time to ensure it ignited widespread change. The next morning, national media covered the fallout extensively. Headlines proclaimed leadership shakeups, frozen funding, and a commitment to systemic reform. Social media amplified personal testimonies from employees and passengers, creating a groundswell of public demand for accountability. Maya knew the dominoes were falling, but each one had to be guided carefully to prevent backsliding. "Every action must have a consequence," she told Daniel, "and every success must be documented so no one can ignore it. This is how culture changes, one step at a time." As she prepared for the next round of meetings with regulatory agencies, Maya felt a rare sense of clarity. The Apex Showdown was more than a confrontation, it was a turning point. And with every careful move, she was shaping a new standard for accountability and equity across the airline industry. The morning sun streamed through the towering windows of Ellison Global Partners' Manhattan office, casting long lines across the sleek conference table. Dr. Maya Ellison sat quietly, sipping black coffee, her eyes scanning a growing dossier of Apex Airways incidents. Naomi Fields had just returned from a series of interviews with passengers who had been subjected to humiliating treatment on multiple flights. The stories were painful, each more damning than the last. "Look at this," Naomi said, placing her tablet on the table. Another senior executive admitted on tape that certain passengers were being profiled to protect the premium experience. This one's from last month, and it directly implicates regional managers across 3 states. Maya's jaw tightened. "It's worse than we thought. They've built an entire network of employees whose job it is to enforce discrimination quietly, behind the scenes. She leaned back, the weight of strategy pressing down. We need to hit them where it hurts public exposure, financial leverage, and legal accountability. All three simultaneously. At that moment, Marcus Hayes entered, holding a thick envelope. "I got more reports from employees," he said. "People are finally speaking up. They've been waiting for permission to tell the truth. Now that you've shown it's safe, they're coming forward." Maya nodded. "Good. Every testimony strengthens our position. We'll need them for the press conference, for investor meetings, and for any legal proceedings. Naomi, can you coordinate?" Naomi exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders. "Yes, but some of these employees are terrified. They've seen colleagues punished for less." "I know," Maya replied. "That's why protection is essential. Legal shields, anonymity when needed, and emotional support. We can't just expose the wrongs. We must safeguard the people who risk everything to do the right thing." Meanwhile, Apex Airways headquarters was in chaos. News of the upcoming press conference had leaked, and the executives were scrambling to craft a narrative that could salvage their reputation. Charles Davenport paced the CEO's office, his face pale. "If they go public with everything Naomi and Maya have collected, the stock will plummet," he muttered to Lydia Hargrove. "The board will be furious." Patricia Lawrence's office was no calmer. She'd called an emergency meeting with the remaining executives. "We cannot underestimate their influence," she warned. "They've built a coalition of employees, passengers, and investors. Our usual PR spin won't suffice. We have to anticipate every move." Back at EGP, Maya and Naomi were finalizing the strategy for the press conference. "We start with the video evidence," Maya said. "Then move to personal testimonies from employees. The financial consequences will be the final blow: funding withdrawals, stock warnings, and investor notices." Naomi hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. "Maya, I know we have to do this, but it feels personal now. Every story reminds me of what happened to me, how I was humiliated." Maya placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It is personal, Naomi, but that personal pain is what gives us power. It makes the stories real, relatable. People will connect because they see the humanity in it. We have to channel that into courage, not anger." The press conference room was filled by noon. Cameras, journalists, and legal representatives jammed the space. Maya stood beside Naomi at the podium, both women calm, composed, yet radiating authority. Maya began, her voice deliberate. "Good afternoon. Today, we're here to expose systemic discrimination at Apex Airways. This isn't about isolated incidents. This is a pattern that has persisted for years, sanctioned by leadership and tolerated as policy. We have evidence, video recordings, internal emails, and employee testimonies that demonstrates deliberate racial profiling and exclusionary practices across multiple departments." The room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Naomi clicked her tablet, projecting the first video, a black executive being removed from a first-class lounge despite holding a verified ticket. The footage was clear, undeniable. Gasps filled the room. "This," Naomi said, voice steady, "is what hundreds of passengers and employees have endured." And while Apex's leadership publicly celebrated diversity, they privately encouraged practices that directly contradicted their statements. This is not just hypocrisy. It is illegal and morally reprehensible. Reporters began typing furiously. Phones recorded every word, every frame of the videos. Social media notifications exploded in real time, hashtags trending nationally. Maya continued, guiding the narrative expertly, effective immediately. She said all $5 billion in funding that was to be allocated to Apex Airways through our partnership is suspended. Our partners have been informed. Investors controlling a combined portfolio of $30 billion have been alerted. Apex must demonstrate comprehensive reform, or they will face not only financial consequences but legal accountability at every level. The executives at Apex were watching via live feed. Davenport's face was ashen. Lydia Hargrove slumped in her chair. Patricia Lawrence's fingers trembled as she adjusted her glasses, realizing the scope of their failure. Marcus Hayes then stepped to the microphone, speaking as an insider witness. "I've worked for Apex for over a decade," he began, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "I've seen discrimination happen dozens of times. We were told to remain silent, but staying silent didn't protect us, it protected the system that allowed harm to continue. Today, thanks to Maya and Naomi, our voices finally have power." The effect was immediate. Employees previously fearful began submitting testimonies from the back of the room. Each story reinforced the systemic nature of the abuses. Adding credibility and urgency, the press clutched their notebooks, live feeds capturing every revelation. Naomi paused, looking over at Maya. "This feels like vindication," she whispered. Maya nodded slightly. "Vindication is not the goal. Change is, and change is what they're about to get." The rest of the afternoon unfolded like a meticulously orchestrated operation. Legal teams prepared injunctions and compliance orders. Financial analysts updated investor reports. News outlets prepared breaking news coverage, detailing the suspension of funding and the immediate requirement for Apex to implement reforms. By evening, Apex Airways' stock had dropped nearly 18%. Social media was ablaze with discussions of corporate accountability and systemic discrimination. Public sentiment was overwhelmingly supportive of Maya and Naomi's actions, with hashtags emphasizing justice, dignity, and equality trending nationwide. Maya returned to her apartment, exhausted but focused. She opened her laptop to check emails, messages, and employee reports. Each note she read confirmed that the ripple effect had already begun. Employees felt empowered. Passengers felt heard, and other airlines were taking note. Naomi entered shortly after, holding a notebook filled with summaries of new employee testimonies. "We're only beginning," she said, her voice tinged with fatigue but also resolve. "Yes," Maya agreed, "but today we created momentum. Apex Airways is at a crossroads, and the world is watching. The pressure we applied isn't just about punishment, it's about compelling genuine transformation." As night fell over Manhattan, the city lights mirrored the hum of activity online and across the nation. Reports, posts, and conversations continued to spread. A wave of accountability rolling through corporate America. Maya and Naomi had ignited a movement, and the first tangible victories were already unfolding, in the quiet moments before sleep. Maya reflected on the path ahead. Systemic discrimination didn't vanish overnight, but the Apex reckoning had proven that deliberate action, evidence-based exposure, and unwavering moral authority could shift the balance of power. Every video, every testimony, Every withheld dollar became a lever of justice. And as Naomi reviewed one last testimony from a passenger whose dignity had been violated countless times, she whispered softly, "This is for all of us, and it's just the beginning." The next morning, the world woke to headlines screaming of Apex Airways scandal. Newspapers, online platforms, and TV channels displayed Naomi Field's name alongside photos from the press conference. $5 billion pulled as airline faces reckoning, read one headline. Black CEO exposes systemic discrimination, read another. Social media erupted. Threads of commentary, outrage, and support multiplying by the second. Naomi sat at her hotel room desk, scrolling through notifications, her finger pausing over each message. "It's overwhelming," she whispered to Maya, who was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Maya didn't answer immediately. She simply nodded, letting Naomi absorb the enormity of what had just been set in motion. Across the Atlantic, similar stories began surfacing. Passengers in London, Paris, and Frankfurt shared experiences mirroring those Naomi had exposed. Employees at several international airlines reached out, quietly, fearful but eager to provide testimonies. Naomi's work had become a global spotlight on systemic discrimination in the airline industry. "I knew it wasn't isolated," Naomi said, her tone somber, "but seeing it everywhere, it's staggering." Maya set her coffee cup down. "Exactly. And that's why we move fast. This isn't just about Apex. It's about every airline, every executive who thinks profits justify prejudice. We have to create a standard that's enforceable worldwide." The first phone call of the day came from the Federal Aviation Authority. "Ms. Fields, Dr. Ellison, we're aware of the situation. We want to schedule a consultation on industry regulations. Your documentation is critical to shaping federal policy," the voice on the line said. Naomi exhaled, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility. Marcus Hayes, seated beside Naomi, rubbed his eyes. "We've opened Pandora's box," he said, "but in a good way." "That's exactly right," Maya replied. "Now we have to ensure the wave doesn't dissipate. Every move we make needs precision. Investors, regulators, media, all eyes are on Apex, and by extension, the entire sector." Naomi and Maya quickly coordinated interviews with journalists in New York, London, and Los Angeles. Each story reinforced the systemic nature of discrimination, detailing first-hand accounts from employees and passengers. Video clips of executives caught on hidden recordings denying complaints, training materials promoting biased behavior, and emails that discussed maintaining a premium image of exclusivity made headlines. By mid-afternoon, Apex Airways' remaining board members convened an emergency virtual meeting. The screen was filled with nervous faces, each lit by the glow of their laptops. Charles Davenport's voice broke first. "We need an immediate damage control plan. Public apologies, internal reforms, anything to stabilize the stock." Patricia Lawrence leaned back, visibly shaken. "It's too late for half measures." Naomi and Maya didn't just expose incidents, they revealed a culture. You can't spin culture. It's baked into your operations. Meanwhile, Naomi and Maya drafted an open letter to airline executives globally. The letter outlined the Fields Protocol, a framework for identifying and correcting systemic discrimination, complete with auditing requirements, employee protections, and transparent reporting. It emphasized that airlines could no longer rely on superficial diversity initiatives. Action had to be measurable, enforceable, and continuous. Marcus watched Naomi as she typed. "You know, I never imagined a gate agent could have this kind of impact," he said. Naomi smiled faintly. "I didn't either. But when injustice is in front of you, staying silent isn't an option." Late afternoon brought a call from a group of Apex employees who had been previously intimidated into silence. "We want to testify before the board," one of them said. "We've been waiting for someone like you to give us permission." Naomi nodded, heart pounding. "We'll coordinate logistics. You'll be protected. Your voices matter." As evening fell over Manhattan, social media sentiment grew increasingly critical of Apex. Hashtags calling for executive accountability and regulatory intervention dominated trending topics. Even corporate investors, watching the stock dive, began publicly questioning the leadership's ability to rectify systemic issues. That night, Naomi and Maya convened their small strategy team in the hotel suite. "Tomorrow," Maya began, "we coordinate the first wave of global audits, London, Tokyo, Los Angeles. We set the tone, no more exceptions, no more tolerance for bias. The message has to be consistent. Equity is non-negotiable." Naomi rubbed her temples. "It's a lot. I worry about the backlash, the personal attacks, the threats. They'll come." Maya placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Let them come. We have evidence, we have law, we have truth. That's stronger than any smear campaign." Meanwhile, across the country, Apex executives were facing internal revolt. Managers who had previously enforced discriminatory policies were being confronted by employees armed with video evidence and emails. Some resigned immediately. Others begged for mediation. The company's PR team scrambled to manage the crisis, but the magnitude was beyond spin. Early the next morning, Naomi received a call from a CEO of a competing airline. "Ms. Fields, your work has set a new standard. We want to implement the Fields protocol across our organization. Can we consult with you?" Naomi's heart swelled. It was the proof that the ripple effect was real, that the work extended far beyond a single airline or a single scandal. By midday, regulatory agencies began contacting Maya and Naomi directly. The FAA, SEC, and Department of Justice sought their recommendations for immediate enforcement mechanisms. Naomi felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration finally. The structures were aligning to support change rather than just expose wrongdoing. Late afternoon brought an unexpected video conference from Apex's legal team. "Ms. Fields, Dr. Ellison," a voice began, hesitant. "We acknowledge the systemic issues you've exposed. We are prepared to implement immediate changes, including leadership restructuring, comprehensive audits, and formal employee protections." Naomi allowed herself a small smile. "Acknowledgement is the first step," she said. "Implementation is what matters. We'll be monitoring every step." By evening, Manhattan's skyline glittered against the encroaching night. Naomi sat on the balcony of her hotel, phone in hand, reviewing messages from passengers and employees thanking her for giving them a voice. Every note reinforced that the battle was far from over, but meaningful change was possible. Maya joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You did more in a few weeks than most executives do in a lifetime," she said softly. Naomi looked out at the lights below. "It's not about me," she replied. "It's about creating a system where no one else has to endure what I did, what countless others have endured. If we keep pushing, keep auditing, keep demanding accountability, we can shift the entire industry." Maya nodded, eyes fixed on the city. and we will. One airline, one policy, one courageous act at a time. As the night deepened, Naomi drafted a final note to her team tomorrow. The field's protocol would go international. Her pulse quickened at the thought. The work would be relentless, demanding, and fraught with resistance, but for the first time, she could see tangible progress. The first dominoes had fallen, and the momentum was unstoppable. By sunrise the following day, Naomi Fields and Dr. Maya Ellison were already on a video call with regulatory representatives from Europe, Asia, and South America. The conversation was intense, each participant highlighting systemic issues in their region's airlines. Naomi listened carefully, taking notes, but inside she felt the familiar churn of responsibility, the weight of knowing that what she had uncovered in Apex was just the tip of a global iceberg. Ms. Fields, the patterns are eerily similar across carriers, said Elena Martinez, head of Spain's Civil Aviation Oversight. Discrimination isn't just tolerated, it's institutionalized. The emails, the policies, even some employee incentive programs, all pointing to the same biases you exposed. Maya leaned in, voice calm but firm. That's exactly why we created the field's protocol. We need to establish a standard that can be implemented anywhere. Audits, anonymous reporting, executive accountability, non-negotiable metrics. Naomi nodded. We can't just treat this as a PR issue. It has to be about culture, and culture is built from the top down. If executives aren't on board, the protocols fail before they even start. The team spent hours mapping out the rollout. London, Tokyo, São Paulo, and Johannesburg would be the first cities to implement the field's protocol, targeting both international and domestic carriers. Naomi insisted that undercover auditors from diverse backgrounds be deployed in each location, capturing the nuanced ways discrimination manifested in different cultures. While the strategy session continued, Naomi's phone buzzed with another message from a former Apex Airways flight attendant. James Keller. Ms. Fields, I've collected internal documents on discriminatory training in several international hubs. I'm ready to share. We can expose patterns globally. Naomi felt a surge of relief and determination. The dots were connecting, the narrative becoming undeniable. By midday, Naomi joined a live-streamed interview with Bloomberg. This isn't about one airline, she said, her voice steady yet emotive. It's about an entire industry. Every carrier that thinks exclusion is acceptable must be held accountable. The field's protocol is our blueprint to ensure that passengers, regardless of race or appearance, are treated with dignity and respect. Social media immediately amplified the message. Field's protocol and equity in airlines began trending internationally. Videos of Naomi calmly detailing Apex's discriminatory practices racked up millions of views within hours. People were tagging friends, sharing their own experiences, and demanding accountability. Naomi realized that the story had evolved beyond her own ordeal. It had become a global movement. Back in the Manhattan Hotel, Marcus Hayes monitored global reactions. Ms. Fields, look at this, he said, pointing to a live map of tweets, news mentions, and employee testimonies streaming in real time. We've got employees in 27 countries reaching out, asking how to implement these standards. The momentum is insane. Naomi took a deep breath. That's the point. We want this to be unstoppable. Not just one airline, not just one continent. Every company, everywhere, needs to feel the pressure to do better. By afternoon, Naomi and Maya had convened a private call with a coalition of international investors who had been watching the Apex situation closely. "We're impressed with your thorough documentation and approach," said Pierre Leclerc, a Paris-based investment manager. "We're ready to condition funding on compliance with the field's protocol across all airlines in our portfolio." Naomi felt a pang of validation. This was the leverage she needed. By tying financial incentives to cultural accountability, the protocol could not be ignored. "It's time to demonstrate that equity is profitable," she said quietly, almost to herself. As evening approached, Naomi allowed herself a moment of reflection. She looked out over the Manhattan skyline, imagining planes tracing arcs across the globe, carrying passengers whose experiences would now, hopefully, be safer, fairer, more dignified. Maya joined her, sipping tea. "You ever think about how it all started?" Maya asked. One gate, one flight, one moment of injustice. Naomi's gaze was distant. "I do, and yet that one moment revealed so much. It's ironic, isn't it? One flight, one seat, and suddenly the world is paying attention." Maya smiled. The smallest act of courage can have the largest ripple effect. The next few days were a whirlwind. Naomi's team was inundated with requests from airlines, regulators, and advocacy groups. Each audit required meticulous planning, from undercover bookings to reviewing internal training materials. The pressure was relentless. But Naomi found strength in knowing that tangible change was taking place. In the midst of the chaos, Naomi received a surprising email from Victoria Hale, the former Apex security director who had been fired. The subject line read, "Seeking Redemption." Naomi opened the email cautiously. Victoria wrote that she had spent months reflecting on her actions and the harm she had caused. She was establishing a foundation aimed at providing legal support and advocacy for victims of airline discrimination. "I know I cannot undo the past," Victoria admitted, "but I want to ensure no one else suffers as I caused others to suffer. I hope you will advise us." Naomi paused. She could have ignored the message. She could have dismissed it entirely. But instead, she typed a measured response. "Submit your proposal. I will review it. Redemption is earned through action, not words." Meanwhile, global auditors reported back, in Tokyo, a black executive was denied lounge access despite holding a first-class ticket. In Sao Paulo, an Asian family was asked repeatedly for proof of funds for upgrades. Each report validated Naomi's concerns, reinforcing the necessity of an international standard. By the end of the week, Naomi convened a final virtual summit with her international coalition. "We have evidence," she said, her tone resolute. "We have documentation. We have financial leverage. And, most importantly, we have the moral imperative. The field's protocol is not optional. Every airline, every regulator, every executive must implement it, fully and transparently." Marcus, watching the live stream from New York, whispered to Maya, "She's changed the game. This isn't just corporate reform, it's systemic." Naomi leaned back in her chair, exhaustion and satisfaction intermingling. The work ahead was enormous, but for the first time, she felt that real, lasting change was possible. The global ripple effect had begun. Airlines in Europe and Asia announced preliminary audits. Governments expressed interest in regulatory enforcement. Passengers worldwide shared their experiences, inspired to speak out. Naomi's single act of standing firm on one flight had triggered a movement spanning continents, industries, and cultures. That night, Naomi drafted a personal note to her mother back in Detroit. "Mama, it's happening. People are listening. Systems are being challenged. The world is beginning to recognize what dignity really means." Her mother's reply was simple but profound. "You always knew your seat was yours. Now, everyone else knows theirs is too." The morning sun spilled across the New York skyline, and Naomi Fields was already seated in her hotel room with multiple devices, open laptops, tablets, and encrypted communication apps. Reports from the Fields protocol audits were arriving in real time, each one painting a picture of deep-seated discrimination that spanned continents. She could feel the momentum building, but she knew the real test would be at the boardroom level. Apex Airlines had called an emergency shareholder meeting, attempting to salvage its reputation after the viral incidents Naomi had exposed months earlier. Naomi, fully aware of her leverage, decided she would attend virtually. Her presence was unannounced. She wanted the board to experience the full weight of her findings without any pretense of negotiation. The live feed flickered to life, showing the Apex board members assembled in the glass and chrome conference room. CEO Gerald Morrison sat at the head of the table, exuding corporate authority, though a subtle tension was visible in his jaw. Naomi muted her microphone and watched as he attempted to deliver the company's carefully crafted apology. "For the record," Naomi interjected after a moment, her voice calm but carrying across the digital line. "Apologies are only words. Actions are what define you. Let's talk about those, shall we?" The board members stiffened, exchanging uneasy glances. Morrison cleared his throat. "Ms. Fields, your interventions have caused tremendous upheaval. We are prepared to discuss corrective measures and oversight." Naomi leaned forward. "Corrective measures? Yes, but not partial ones. Not measures designed to protect your image. Real change requires transparency, accountability, and consequences tied to every executive decision. I have the evidence, and I have the investors. Every penny, every contract, every international route is contingent upon compliance with the Fields Protocol." Marcus Hayes, monitoring Naomi's feed from a nearby office, whispered to himself, "This is gonna hurt." He had seen executives react defensively before, but this level of direct confrontation was unprecedented. Naomi methodically presented the evidence she had gathered: discriminatory staff training manuals, internal emails encouraging selective enforcement of premium cabin rules, and recorded incidents where passengers of color were moved, ignored, or humiliated while white passengers received preferential treatment. Each slide displayed numbers, dates, and names, the weight of proof undeniable. As the board attempted to respond, Naomi delivered the pivot based on the comprehensive audit. All $5 billion in pending funding from Advalent Group, along with commitments from our partner institutions totaling $30 billion, will be withheld until the board is restructured. Apex demonstrates independent oversight, and full restitution is offered to affected passengers. A stunned silence filled the room. The ramifications were immediate. Media outlets were already live streaming portions of the meeting, and financial analysts began calculating the impact on Apex's stock in real time. Investors on the other side of the planet were watching closely, tweets and breaking news alerts firing off across multiple continents. Gerald Morrison's face turned red as he attempted to defend the company. "Ms. Fields, we've already taken steps to address these incidents: terminations, policy updates, retraining." Naomi's voice remained steady, unflinching. "You had policies. Yes, but they were never enforced. You settled lawsuits quietly while continuing the same practices. Policies without enforcement are meaningless. Actions, not words, will determine Apex's future. Victoria Hale, who had been quietly observing from the margins, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She had once defended these very policies, but now she saw the inevitable collapse of the structures she had upheld. Evelyn Hale's daughter, Sarah, had emailed Naomi earlier, expressing admiration for her courage, a small but powerful reminder of the generational stakes involved. Morrison attempted another line of defense, citing financial pressures and the need to maintain shareholder confidence. Naomi cut him off. Financial pressures. Discrimination has already cost you billions in settlements, lost funding, and stock value. Ignoring moral responsibility is not a business strategy. It's a death sentence for your company. At that moment, the first of many investors began chiming in. Pierre Leclerc from Paris, on the video feed, spoke firmly. Naomi Fields has demonstrated that systemic risk exists in your corporate culture. Until these structures are reformed and verified externally, no additional capital will be deployed. This is non-negotiable. Other investors followed suit. Representatives from Asia, North America, and South America all echoed Leclerc's stance. Naomi watched, noting how quickly the financial leverage had shifted. Apex Airlines was now in the position she had orchestrated total dependency on compliance with the Fields protocol. Naomi leaned back for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle in. The board members looked pale, some sweating, others attempting to exchange hurried whispers. She had engineered a scenario where their survival depended entirely on reform and accountability. Marcus watched silently, impressed by Naomi's strategic precision. She's not just exposing corruption. She's redesigning incentives to make change unavoidable, he said under his breath. The conversation shifted to implementation. Naomi outlined specific, measurable steps: an independent oversight committee, mandatory training with third-party audits, restitution funds for affected passengers, and personal accountability for executives. She emphasized that compliance would be continuously monitored and publicly reported. Gerald Morrison, his voice trembling slightly, finally asked, "Ms. Fields, what if the board resists these changes?" Naomi's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. "Then you will face the consequences of inaction. Investors will withdraw. Lawsuits will continue, and your company will fail. The choice is yours: lead responsibly or collapse under the weight of systemic injustice." Several senior board members began whispering among themselves. Naomi could sense the cracks forming in the facade of control. She allowed herself a moment to reflect. This was more than a personal victory. It was a demonstration that systemic change was possible when accountability and leverage aligned. After 3 hours of intense negotiation, Apex Board reluctantly agreed to Naomi's conditions. The CEO and several executives resigned immediately. An independent oversight committee was established, and the restitution fund was formalized. The $5 billion in funding remained frozen until compliance was verified. As the virtual meeting ended, Naomi allowed herself a brief exhale. The pressure was far from over, but a monumental victory had been achieved. Apex Airlines, once emblematic of entrenched discrimination, was now forced to rebuild on principles of equity, transparency, and accountability. That evening, Naomi received a private message from James Keller. "Ms. Fields, The pilots and flight attendants you've inspired are already coming forward, documenting more incidents. We're ready for the next phase." Naomi smiled quietly. The ripple effect was spreading. Later, as she looked out over the Manhattan skyline, Naomi reflected on the path ahead. She had turned her personal ordeal into systemic change, leveraging proof, morality, and financial power. But she also knew the vigilance required the world would not remain equitable without constant enforcement. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Maya Ellison. "We're ready for global rollout. This is bigger than we imagined." Naomi tapped a reply. "Then let's make history." The morning air in Washington, D.C. carried a crisp clarity as Naomi Fields arrived at the headquarters of the Department of Transportation. Her schedule was packed, but she moved with calm authority, her mind already running through the details of the day's agenda. Today, she would meet with federal regulators and legislators to expand the Fields protocol beyond the airline industry, ensuring that discrimination anywhere in commercial service would no longer remain hidden or profitable. Inside the conference room, Naomi was greeted by Secretary of Transportation Claire Reynolds and Deputy Attorney General Thomas Whitaker. The room buzzed with anticipation. This was a pivotal moment. Naomi's presence alone had shifted the political calculus. She laid out the evidence collected from Apex Airlines, along with findings from preliminary audits of other U.S. carriers. She spoke methodically, connecting the dots between corporate culture, operational policies, and systemic discrimination that persisted despite existing regulations. "Discrimination isn't just moral failure," Naomi explained, her voice steady, measured, but resonant. "It is an operational risk and a financial liability. Companies calculate that settlements are cheaper than real change. That calculation is exactly why the Fields Protocol was created. We make discrimination expensive, unavoidable, and publicly accountable." Claire Reynolds leaned forward. "Ms. Fields, how do we ensure compliance without stifling business innovation?" Naomi paused, letting the weight of the question settle. Innovation is meaningless if it is built on exclusion. Compliance must be auditable, transparent, and enforceable. That means independent oversight, restitution funds, and consequences for executive inaction. Businesses cannot hide behind corporate shields or algorithms that disguise bias. Across the table, Thomas Whitaker nodded. "And the Fields Protocol can be applied to industries beyond aviation." "Yes," Naomi said, a small, satisfied smile forming. "Hotels, restaurants, rental services, even digital platforms. Anywhere public access is commoditized, systemic bias can exist. Our audits are tailored, undercover, and evidence-based. The objective is to make discriminatory practices financially, legally, and socially unsustainable." Meanwhile, Marcus Hayes monitored communications from Apex. The airline was scrambling to comply with Naomi's conditions, issuing internal memos, arranging mandatory retraining, and reorganizing the board structure. Naomi could see the changes taking root, but she knew one major challenge remained. Culture is slow to change, and entrenched attitudes persisted in subtle ways that policies alone could not eradicate. Later that afternoon, Naomi held a secure video call with her international network of auditors, including Dr. Maya Ellison, who coordinated compliance initiatives in Europe and Asia. Reports from London, Paris, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo painted a familiar picture. Discrimination was alive and well, often embedded in premium service protocols and hidden behind loyalty programs and algorithmic decision-making. Our first global audit starts next week, Naomi announced. We'll use the Apex model as a template. Every company must understand that inclusion is not optional, it's enforceable. On the other side of the video feed, Maya spoke. The challenge will be resistance. Many executives will claim cultural differences or operational norms as justification. Naomi nodded. That's why we focus on outcomes, not excuses. Proof is undeniable. Violations will have measurable consequences, from funding withdrawals to legal action. No company can ignore this. That evening, Naomi reviewed messages from passengers affected by Apex Airlines' previous policies. Stories of humiliation, microaggressions, and systemic exclusion were deeply moving. Yet they strengthened her resolve. She read a message from a young Asian woman in Seattle, Miss Fields. I've always loved traveling, but I feared being judged, ignored, or treated as less than. Your work shows me that dignity is non-negotiable. A pang of emotion rose in Naomi's chest. She had started this journey for herself, to assert her right to exist without prejudice. But now she realized the reach of her actions. It wasn't just about her seat on that plane. It was about millions of invisible battles fought every day in airports, hotels, and other public spaces. The following morning, Naomi convened her team of auditors, a diverse group of former employees, civil rights lawyers, and trained operatives skilled in undercover operations. They called themselves the Equity Force, a name that carried weight beyond its simplicity. Our mandate, Naomi began, is global. We expose systemic discrimination, enforce compliance, and ensure restitution for victims. This isn't just about policies, it's about culture, accountability, and proof. Each of you represents change in its most tangible form. Marcus Hayes, now a senior consultant, added, and every audit you conduct carries the potential to reshape an industry. Be precise, be patient, but be relentless. The world is watching. Naomi spent hours reviewing logistics for the first wave of global audits. The team planned simultaneous interventions in Europe, North America, and Asia. Their approach was standardized yet adaptable undercover assessments, documentation, and immediate escalation financial backers and regulators if violations were confirmed. Meanwhile, Apex Airlines' compliance efforts continued to unfold. Internal audits revealed ongoing issues, but the visibility imposed by Naomi's oversight forced rapid remediation. A senior flight attendant, Simone Carter, who had previously witnessed discriminatory behavior but feared retaliation, now came forward publicly. I stayed silent for years, she said in a recorded statement. But Ms. Fields gave me permission to speak the truth. Now I can finally help change the system from within. Naomi felt a quiet pride. Each story of courage reinforced the principle that transformation required both leverage and moral courage. Change was possible, but it demanded participation at every level: executives, employees, and passengers alike. Later that week, Naomi addressed a congressional hearing focused on commercial equity. Lawmakers, civil rights advocates, and industry leaders filled the chamber. She presented Apex Airlines as a case study, detailing both the failures and the systemic improvements achieved through the Fields Protocol. This isn't just about one airline, Naomi explained, her voice carrying across the room. It's about an industry-wide reckoning. Policies exist, but enforcement, oversight and accountability have been missing. We cannot legislate morality, but we can legislate consequences, and that is what will drive lasting change. Questions came rapidly from multiple members of Congress. One asked about the scalability of the protocol. Naomi explained. Scalability is inherent. Every industry has public-facing operations. By documenting incidents, enforcing restitution, and tying compliance to financial incentives, we create an environment where discrimination is too costly to tolerate. After the hearing, Naomi received messages from other sectors, hospitality, ride-sharing, and digital services all expressing interest in adopting her protocol. The impact was becoming global. That evening, she returned to her hotel, exhausted but resolute. As she looked out at the city skyline, she reflected on the journey that had begun with a single flight, a single act of refusal, and a single assertion of dignity. The ripple effects now spanned continents, influencing not only airlines but the broader landscape of commercial ethics. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Evelyn Hale, who had agreed to testify before Congress about the systemic practices she had once enforced. "I can't undo the past," Evelyn wrote, "but maybe this will prevent someone else from repeating it." Naomi stared at the message, feeling the profound complexity of justice and redemption. Some transformations were internal, some external, but all were necessary for lasting change. She replied simply, "Thank you for speaking the truth." As the night deepened, Naomi drafted her next series of global interventions. Each operation would challenge entrenched assumptions, push boundaries, and demand accountability. But she also allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, considering the passengers, employees, and observers whose lives were quietly being reshaped by her work. This mission, she realized, was far larger than any one airline or any single incident. It was a movement, a global awakening to the necessity of dignity, equity, and accountability in commercial spaces. The morning sunlight poured through the towering glass windows of the Manhattan Conference Hall, illuminating the rows of chairs that had been filled with leaders from every corner of the aviation and hospitality industries. Naomi Fields stood backstage, adjusting the lapel of her blazer and taking a slow, deep breath. Today was the culmination of years of painstaking work, the day the Fields Protocol would be presented as a global standard. The audience erupted into polite applause as Naomi stepped onto the stage. She allowed herself a brief smile, feeling the weight of expectation and responsibility. Every face in the room carried curiosity, hope, or perhaps a measure of skepticism. She knew that changing hearts was far more complex than changing policies. But she also knew that policy change laid the foundation for cultural transformation. I've spent the past 4 years traveling from city to city, industry to industry, exposing the ways systemic discrimination has been tolerated and, in some cases, rewarded. Naomi began. Her voice was calm but carried an undeniable authority. It started with a single flight, a single moment when I refused to give up my seat. But what happened that day was never just about me. It was about every person who had been told, subtly or overtly, that they didn't belong. The room was silent, every ear tuned to her words. Naomi displayed a slide showing global audit results airlines, hotel chains, ride-sharing platforms, and luxury retail brands. Patterns emerged that were painfully familiar microaggressions codified into operational procedures, algorithmic pricing biases, and a persistent culture that rewarded conformity over justice. She clicked to the next slide, showing the cumulative financial impact of inaction, billions in settlements, lost revenue, and public relations disasters. Discrimination is costly, Naomi said, pausing for emphasis. Not just morally, but economically. Companies that embrace inclusion thrive. Those that resist face collapse. Marcus Hayes appeared on the stage beside her, a reassuring presence. Together, they presented footage from undercover audits of black CEO being questioned about her reservation. An Asian family asked for proof of payment repeatedly, and employees caught in the act of denying services based on race. Each clip was a stark reminder that the problem was global, pervasive, and systematic. Naomi watched the reactions carefully. There were murmurs of recognition, nods of concern, and a few shocked expressions. She had chosen carefully which footage to show, balancing impact with respect for the privacy of those affected. The goal was not to humiliate, but to illuminate. During a short break, Naomi received a private message from Dr. Maya Ellison, her international partner. The European and Asian regulatory bodies are coordinating with us. They're adopting your protocol as the standard. Congratulations. This is historic. Naomi allowed herself a brief smile, but quickly refocused. Every success brought new responsibilities. After the presentation, Naomi invited several industry leaders to join her on stage for a live demonstration. They simulated a standard audit, showing how employees reacted differently when policies of inclusion were enforced. The reactions were immediate, courteous, professional, and consistent across diverse employees. It was a small but powerful illustration of change in action. Then came the moment Naomi had anticipated but never taken for granted: the announcement from Apex Airlines. Gerald Morrison, the current CEO, stepped forward. Under Ms. Field's guidance, we've restructured our operations, retrained every staff member, and implemented independent oversight. We are committed to genuine inclusion, not just compliance. The Field's protocol has become our guiding principle. Applause echoed through the hall, but Naomi's mind was already shifting to the broader picture. Apex was just one company. The mission was far larger. After the event, Naomi retreated to a quiet lounge to review messages. Evelyn Hale had just sent a text confirming her testimony before an International Human Rights Commission. Victoria Hale, once her adversary, had shared her foundation's draft proposal to support discrimination victims worldwide. Simone Carter had been promoted to regional supervisor at Apex, her courage finally recognized. Naomi allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Her journey had begun with fear, humiliation, and determination. Yet it had grown into a movement capable of reshaping industries globally. She thought about the countless passengers who would now travel without the anxiety she had once faced. Employees empowered to speak up without fear, and a system that now had teeth to enforce accountability. Later, Naomi attended a gala celebrating the adoption of the Field's protocol internationally. Representatives from airlines, hotels, and tech companies mingled, sharing stories of transformation. Naomi listened as employees recounted how they had once feared speaking out, but now felt emboldened by the framework she had established. "You gave us permission to do the right thing," one hotel manager told her quietly. "That changes everything." As the evening drew to a close, Naomi walked to the balcony, looking out over the city lights that stretched endlessly in every direction. Her thoughts drifted to the young passengers, the marginalized travelers, and the employees who had once been silenced. Each small act of courage had contributed to this moment. Yet Naomi understood that vigilance was ongoing. Discrimination could evolve, reappear in new forms, but the field's protocol had created a durable mechanism for accountability. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus had sent a brief note: International Audit Team ready. First operations in Asia and Europe start next month. Your leadership is changing the world. Naomi smiled, feeling the profound weight of their collective work. She drafted a reply: every flight, every interaction, every business matters. Let's keep going. Finally, Naomi returned to her hotel room, the city sprawling below like a tapestry of light. She opened her laptop and saw dozens of messages from passengers, employees, and fellow auditors. Each message reinforced the same truth: dignity and equity mattered, and her refusal to accept less than what was right had catalyzed change far beyond a single flight or airline. Before going to bed, Naomi wrote in her journal, a practice she had maintained throughout her journey. Year 4 begins tomorrow. The work continues. We have proven that change is possible. It is not complete, but every act of courage, every policy enforced, every voice heard, moves us closer to a world where everyone can exist with dignity. She closed the journal and looked out the window. Planes streaking across the night sky, carrying passengers who might never know her name, but whose journeys had been transformed by her unwavering commitment. In that quiet, Naomi felt the depth of what had been accomplished. The field's protocol was no longer just a tool. It had become a movement, a global standard, and a beacon of hope. Her mission would continue, but for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full measure of accomplishment and hope for the future. The world had shifted because one woman refused to accept injustice, and because she had the courage to turn indignity into a global call for equity. Naomi Field's story teaches us that courage and integrity can transform not only personal experiences, but entire systems. One person's refusal to accept injustice can spark widespread change, proving that standing up for what is right is never insignificant. The narrative reminds us that silence may feel safe, but it allows systemic inequities to persist. Choosing accountability, even in the face of fear or humiliation, can empower others and create a ripple effect that reshapes society. Equally important is the lesson of strategic action. Courage, combined with preparation, evidence, and thoughtful advocacy, magnifies impact. Naomi did not react impulsively. She documented, analyzed, and leveraged her position to enforce meaningful consequences, demonstrating that true leadership requires both moral clarity and tactical intelligence. For audiences, especially older viewers who have witnessed societal challenges, this story resonates as a call to recognize injustices around them, support those who speak out, and understand the lasting value of dignity, respect, and ethical responsibility. It affirms that meaningful change is possible at any age, in any industry, and that collective awareness and courage can reshape institutions for the better. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. If Naomi's story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that matter, stories that challenge injustice and celebrate courage. Join us, and let's make a difference together.